As with a lot of things, there's a lot of different types of web hosting out there. Today, I want to talk to you about Cloudways, which uses something called Virtual Private Server, VPS, and how it might be a super solid alternative to something like SiteGround or Bluehost or something like that, even for people who are just starting out. When you're out there looking for web hosting for your site, you're going to find that a lot of bloggers are talking about things like SiteGround and Bluehost and HostGator and these types of things. Now, of those options, I think SiteGround is the better plan because any web host that is owned by EIG, I am not a massive fan of. EIG is a conglomerate company that has sucked up all of these companies, including Bluehost and some of the other big ones, and their quality level is just not that good. I've personally had sites hacked on those things, and I don't recommend them. Now, SiteGround remains an independent company as of now, and so therefore, of those typical shared intro-level hosting plans, I think SiteGround is a really solid option. Now, when you go with these plans, what a lot of times you'll find is that they'll hook you in with some really low intro fee, like $3.99 a month or $6.99 a month, and you're like, well, that seems like a really good deal. However, the way they work is that after about a year, that plan will shoot up. And so, for example, with SiteGround, you pay $6.99 a month, but that's only when you prepay for a full year. And then after that year, that plan is going to shoot up to like $14.99 a month, which is a significantly big price jump, okay? And the other thing is that SiteGround, it's a shared hosting plan, which means that you are sharing the same server resources with other people on the server. It's a good account. SiteGround's a good company. It's very all-in-one. It's very focused on people who are newbies to everything. They kind of hold your hand a little bit. And so it's a good, solid company. Now, today, I want to talk to you about Cloudways. Cloudways is the company that I have switched my business to, and I want to make the case on why it might be something that you want to look into, but it is a different kind of web hosting, and that's something that we need to talk about here because it uses what's called a virtual private server or VPS. And the way it works is that Cloudways is essentially a middleman, and it works with various cloud hosting providers that provide VPS services such as DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode. I think it works with Amazon and Google Cloud. And so your VPS is actually hosted on one of those 5 providers, but you're actually purchasing it through Cloudways. And so you pay a little premium over that. But what you're getting for that is all of the convenience of managed web hosting like you would be used to with something like WP Engine or WPX Hosting or SiteGround even. You're paying for all that, but you're putting it onto a virtual private server. Now, a virtual private server is basically sort of like a dedicated server. Except that it's using software virtualization technology in order to create it. And so what's happening is that kind of like that computer over there, you're kind of pretend like that computer was being created artificially by a piece of software. And so it has a certain amount of memory, it has a certain amount of CPU horsepower dedicated to it. And so technically you would be sharing the same physical server with other people. However, because it's using that virtualization software, the resources are dedicated exclusively to you, which is a big difference over typical shared hosting like SiteGround or Bluehost or something like that, where everybody's sharing the same pool of resources. And so that opens you up to security issues. It opens you up to speed issues. If other people on the same server are just hogging a lot of resources and your site can slow down. With a VPS, that's not the case. The resources that you have are fully dedicated to you. And so it's a very different style of web hosting, and Cloudways is a really solid way to do it because a VPS can be a very nerdy experience. But with Cloudways, it puts this layer over top of it, which makes it just as easy to manage as any other web hosting account that you might use. Now, before I jump into Cloudways and show you what it actually looks like, let's first talk a little bit about why you might want to use a VPS style host versus what most people are using, like a typical shared host. What are some of the advantages of using a virtual private server? So let's go over a few of them right now. The first one is that you probably don't want your site slowing down. As I already mentioned, when you're on a shared hosting plan, then other people who are on the same server as you could slow down your site. The other thing is that you're sharing the same pool of resources, so you can't control what they are doing. And even with your setup, the more plugins that you add, the more traffic that you get, you are actually using more server resources yourself. And so what happens is that everybody's competing for the same resources, and it can slow down your site. One of the key ways of seeing just how slow it can be is in the admin panel of WordPress. When the front end may be okay because you have caching in place and stuff like that, but then when you're trying to manage your site in the back end of WordPress, it is just super sluggish and everything is slow. And it's typically inside the admin panel where you're really going to see just what kind of server horsepower you have. And so if you're really concerned about your site slowing down, you want to have maximum speed available to your site without having other people adversely affect it. A VPS is definitely a solid option for you. Number two is you don't want to have any artificial limits. With a lot of managed WordPress hosting specifically, even though they really don't have any real reason to put limitations on you, such as the number of websites that you can have or the amount of page visits you can get on your site, they're going to do it anyway. It's part of their billing strategy that they will actually put artificial limits on you on how many websites you're allowed to have, how much traffic you're allowed to get, and things like that. Whereas with a VPS, you don't have any such limits because it's your VPS. You can do basically whatever you want with it. Your only limit is going to be the horsepower of the VPS that you're paying for. But if you want to do more with that VPS, you can either just get another VPS or you can scale it up and just give it more server horsepower. But you're not going to have any of those artificial limits, or you're not going to have to go and get a more expensive hosting account because you want to have more than one website. With a VPS, you can totally have more than one website on the same VPS and you'll be perfectly fine. Maybe you have security concerns about your website. As I mentioned, when you're sharing the same server with other people, you can't control what their security practices are. And sometimes your site can have security issues because of the setup of the shared server environment, or even because of something that other people are doing on the same server. Maybe they're running out-of-date plugins that opens up some option for malware and stuff like that. So with a VPS, being that you're not sharing those server resources, you're not going to be opened up to other people's bad security habits. But secondly, being that it's your VPS, you can install any security plugin or option that you want. Nobody's going to tell you what to do. It's your server environment. Perhaps you're running a membership site or some site where you're processing orders. Now, yeah, you can run a membership site and you can run an e-commerce site on a shared hosting plan. However, there's just additional security concerns with that. There might be additional horsepower required. And for that reason, it really gets down to, I think a VPS is just a better option for you if you're doing something like that. It's like, why try to run a legitimate online business on some cheap shared hosting plan where the things that other people are doing on that server could adversely affect your business? With a VPS, it's all dedicated to you. It's basically in a little walled garden, so to speak, where the things that other people are doing have no impact on your data, on your server resources. It's just a much better way to go. Now, when I switched to Cloudways, that was actually one of my primary things because I was on WPX Hosting, which is a good company, but because I'm running a membership site, I had performance issues because I cannot use all the caching stuff that WPX was using. And so when you have a membership site and it needs to remain really dynamic and people are logging in and they're managing their accounts and it's processing orders and stuff like that, having it inside of a VPS is just a much better experience, not only for data security, but also for performance on making that site work really well. Perhaps you just don't want to be limited just to WordPress. A lot of times, a lot of the benefits that we like with managed WordPress hosting is really cool, but the problem is that they will limit you to WordPress. And so, for example, with WP Engine or WPX hosting, they're great services, but you have to use WordPress. Anything else and you're sort of screwed. With Cloudways as a VPS, you can install other software. I don't recommend you use anything besides WordPress, but the point is you can. If you needed to install some forum software that it operates independently of WordPress, you can do that. They're not going to stop you. And so that's one of the benefits of a VPS, is that you can basically do with it what you want. They're not going to tell you what software you can use. Perhaps you could just get some random weird errors with your current host. I certainly was. With WPX hosting, I was having issues where sometimes a server would just become unavailable. I would get weird internal server errors or 500 errors and things like that. And usually what's going on behind the scenes is that there's nothing wrong with your website. What's going on is that the server is literally tapped out on resources. And so, as I've already said before, you're not sharing resources when you're on a VPS. They're all dedicated to you. And so in a lot of cases, if you're editing your site and you're just getting really oddball errors and then you hit the refresh button and then it just disappears, probably what's going on is that you're running out of server resources. And if you switch to a VPS, those problems will go away. Maybe you just like getting more for your money. There's really no way to say it in a different way. You get more for your money with a VPS. You're getting way more server given to you for a smaller amount of money than when you go with a typical shared hosting plan. And some of that is because of the all-in-one nature of, say, a company like SiteGround, but some of it is just for other stuff, and some of which you may not even use. But, they're giving you a certain amount of horsepower. You're sharing it with everybody else. They provide some nice, domain management services and email services and stuff on top of that. Cloudways doesn't do that. We'll get into that in a little bit. But you're just getting a lot more server for your money. And so if you want to have a really high performance site, you want to have a lot of flexibility, and you don't want to pay as much for it, a VPS is a solid way to go. Maybe you're in a position where you work with clients and you want to host their sites too. With a typical shared hosting plan, now some of them are going to have those artificial limits on the number of sites that you can have. We've already covered that. Or you go with one of these shared hosting plans that advertise unlimited sites. Now, the thing is, those are usually a massive gotcha because those unlimited site plans, it's a high promise, but man alive, you're going to have a major set of problems trying to host a lot of websites on a typical shared hosting plan. Now, if you are running an agency or you are hosting clients, a VPS or specifically a Cloudways account, I think is a really solid way to go because you can actually manage multiple VPSs all through one Cloudways account. You can split your clients up among these things. It's very affordable. It gives you a lot of options, so it's definitely a solid alternative if you would like to host client sites, maintain control, be able to provide a service to them, and give them a lot of performance at the same time. It's definitely going to serve you better than a typical shared hosting plan, and it's also going to serve your pocketbook a heck of a lot better than trying to go out and get a full dedicated server. Okay, so let's take a quick look at Cloudways here. When it comes to the features that you're going to get with a Cloudways account, it's pretty similar to what you will find with other sites, with other SiteGrounds, Bluehost, those types of things. And so you can look into these things for you. But what I want to do is show you the main difference here, because when you sign up for Cloudways, you're going to have to pick a VPS provider. So that's one of the important things to understand, is that Cloudways is not actually physically hosting your site. What they are is a middleman for these 5 companies as of now: DigitalOcean, Linode, Vultr, Amazon Web Services, and Google Cloud. And so you're actually getting your VPS through one of these, but you don't have to go over to them and get it yourself. Basically, Cloudways is doing the whole thing. Now, what Cloudways is going to do is provide all the convenience, all this stuff that they say here about the team management. It's the one-click installs, staging sites, automated backups, all the things that you would expect with normal WordPress hosting, so to speak. But it's doing it on top of a VPS, because typically if you were to go to DigitalOcean and get a VPS directly from them, they call it a droplet. It'll be cheaper. It'll be $5 a month rather than $10 a month. But then you're on your own, and it's a really, really nerdy experience to do it. If you're a developer, if you're experienced, and by all means, go knock yourself out. But Cloudways is exactly what it says. It's managed hosting plan with the support and everything there. And that's why I think Cloudways is a much better way to go. Now, your cheapest option here is going to be DigitalOcean, the $10 a month plan, and you're getting a lot for that. I mean, 1 terabyte of bandwidth, 25 gigs of storage. For most people, this is going to be the great way to start. Now, if you're curious what I'm using, I went ahead and switched over to Vultr, and I went specifically with their high frequency account. The Vultr high frequency VPS is basically a VPS that has faster disk, faster memory, things like that. It's really good for a membership site, by the way. And so that's why I went with it. If you're running a membership site or e-commerce or something that's very dynamic and it's making a lot of database queries, and you want to really make sure that it has maximum power for that type of thing, then a Vultr high frequency is a pretty good way to go. And I'm only using the $26 a month plan, but I could easily scale it up if I need to. It's no big deal. But you get a lot for your money here. Now, let me show you what Cloudways actually looks like. Okay, so we're inside of my Cloudways account here, and when you first log in, you're going to get your servers. Now, I've only got the one server. I just called it BMA for Blog Marketing Academy. You can have as many VPSs as you want, all inside of one Cloudways account. Right now, I've only got the one. And so you've got servers, which is your actual VPS, and then you have applications, which are the various like WordPresses that you got set up. Now, I only use WordPress. I've got several of them here, all on the same VPS server. If you were to go and install something else, you would just select what server you wanted it on, add application, and then you can choose. They've got one-click installs for, of course, WordPress. You got the multi-site version. You can install a custom application, the any PHP app, and a bunch of other stuff. Magneto, Drupal, OpenCart, Joomla. You can see. I mean, there's a lot of things here. Most likely, you're going to be going with WordPress. I certainly wouldn't recommend anything else. Now, if you want to run some custom application like forum software or something, you would just go with the custom app, and like I mentioned, you'll be able to install it. It'll work, no problemo. Okay, but that's the way applications work. If you go to mine, you'll see that I've got many of them here. Now, if I were to go over to the Blog Marketing Academy, you'll start to see some of the options that we have available to this. We got access details, of course. You can manage your staging site. You can access the logs and analytics directly in here. You've got bot protection built right in. And so when you set up WordPress, it's going to have a plugin automatically installed inside of WordPress. It integrates with Cloudways, set up so that it will block bot traffic and stuff and not artificially slow down your server. Okay. As far as domain management, you're not managing your domains through Cloudways, but this is just where you will actually point things, point your domain to it. We'll get into that more in a little bit. You can manage your cron jobs directly, which if you don't know what that is, it doesn't really matter. But if you do, it's pretty cool that you can actually manage this directly without having to access command line and stuff like that. It's for running scheduled tasks on your server. SSL certificate, pretty self-explanatory. Managing all of your backups. Git deployment, again, if you know what that is, great. You know that that's cool that you can do it. If you don't know what Git is, doesn't matter. Application settings. This is where you control folders and logins. You can enable various things. And that's one of the things about Cloudways that I like here is that if you know what you're doing, like for example, the varnish cache, you can turn it on. You've got those options available to you. If you don't know what they are because you're newer to this type of stuff, well, you just leave it alone. You don't need to use it, okay? But if you know what you're doing and you need to do like GeoIP, well, you can have it. It's all built right in, okay? You can control some of your PHP settings directly, and of course, I have Varnish turned on for particular caching, so I can control those settings. And then, of course, you've got the CDN. Now, the way the CDN works is that Cloudways will provide it to you. However, it is an additional charge over top of your VPS, okay? However, it's really cheap. I think they're only charging you $1 for the first 25 gigabytes. And then after that, let's see what it is. It's only 4 cents per gigabyte after that, okay? And as you can see, this is probably about 3 weeks worth as of right now. I've only used 9.8 gigs of data, and so I don't even think I'm going to crack through $1 here. And are we really going to worry about getting charged an extra buck or two for CDN to speed up your site? I'm not going to worry about it, and you probably shouldn't either. But then it's a pretty nice, clean control panel. It doesn't look butt ugly like we had over on WPX Hosting. It's nice and clean. Now, when you get over to your server, this is where you're actually managing things related to your specific VPS that could have multiple sites on it, as does mine. So you can have server monitoring in here. You can actually see disk usage and bandwidth and things like that, how much RAM is being used, how much CPU is being used, things like that. You can control different packages that you want to be installed. That's one of the nice things about a VPS is that you actually can, if you know what you're doing, you can actually customize the setup of your VPS, all right? Which is something you just can't do with regular shared hosting. Vertical scaling, if I find that I need more server horsepower, I just ramp that bad boy up, no big deal. Under backups, I can run full server level backups, or you can also manage your backups on an application by application basis. And so I've got both going on, of course. Now, SMTP, this is for sending outgoing email. So this would be one of the things that you need to keep in mind with Cloudways is that it's not going to be sending email from this VPS, okay? You're going to need to integrate it with some other providers such as SendGrid or Mailgun or something like that. You can see that it works with many of them. Many of them are actually free. Like I'm using the SendGrid right now, and it's free. I don't pay anything for it, and I just set up my API key, and basically any emails that are generated by my applications on the server are just going to be sent out automatically via SendGrid, and it just works fine. Okay. So that's basically how this setup works. It's a nice, clean admin panel. You can get around really easy. I've got some staging sites built here, and it's an easy platform to use. So it's clear inside the admin panel that there are a few things that are a little bit more nerdy than if you were to go into SiteGround or something similar. But that being said, if you don't know what those things are, you simply don't use them. And so for the most part, using Cloudways is just like using any other managed WordPress host, except that it gives you a lot more flexibility. They've got live chat support. It's pretty good. I've dealt with it on several instances, and to me, live chat is definitely the preferable way to go. I had a real live human being who knew what they were doing on chat pretty quickly, and so it worked out really well. I'm actually WPX Hosting. That was one of the things I really liked about them, was a really fast live chat support, and I'm happy to find that I've got pretty much the same thing here at Cloudways, so I'm really happy about that. But if you're just starting out, some of the more nerdy aspects, maybe later when you need them, there will be there. But in the meantime, you just sort of ignore them, and everything will work just like what you're used to. Now, there are a couple things that I want to make sure you know going into Cloudways that you need to keep in mind. First of all is that they do not manage your email for you, okay? And so if you want to use a web-based email, a domain-based email for your website, Cloudways is not going to help you with that. that. And so you'll need to route your email someplace else in order to manage it, whether it be Google for Business or Fastmail, which is what I use, or something similar. You'll need to put your email someplace else. For me, that's a feature. I don't really care. I've never used the web-based email with any host that I've ever used. But if you do, you'll need to keep that in mind and route it someplace else. The second thing is that your domain management, as far as your name servers, are not managed by Cloudways either. And so you're going to need to manage your domain wherever you happen to buy it. Okay, so I buy my domains with Namecheap.com. And so in most cases, I'll just manage my domains there and point the web part of it over to Cloudways, and everything just works. Okay, and then for a couple of my sites, I routed everything over to Cloudflare, and so I just use Cloudflare's DNS, and that works fine. So, but they will not manage your domains for you at Cloudways. To me, again, that's a feature because I've never used the built-in domain management with any web host. I like to not have all of my eggs stuck in one basket and have one company controlling everything. And so Cloudways works into my workflow just fine. So those are a couple things to keep in mind, but overall, it's a pretty easy service to use. Okay, so let's wrap this up with the question is Cloudways going to be a good fit for your web hosting, or should you stick with something like SiteGround or WP Engine or WPX Hosting or something like that? I've given you numerous reasons in this video why a VPS might be the preferred hosting option. But when you're first starting out, if you don't know your way around WordPress yet, and still the basics of hosting are still a confusion for you, you might be better off going with something like SiteGround because that's a little bit more their target audience. As I just showed you with Cloudways, there are a few geeky components to it. You don't have to use them. It's just nice that they're there. But for some, just the presence of them might cause a little bit of confusion. The other thing is that when you're dealing with Cloudways support, they are not there to support your use of WordPress. They're pretty much going to assume that you can hold your own in that regard. And so to that end, Cloudways does assume that you're a little bit of a higher level type of user, that you know what a virtual private server is and those types of things. And so if those things confuse you, probably stick with something like SiteGround. I think you will be well served. That being said, if you're okay with having those extra bells and whistles, and you like to get more for your money, then there's no doubt that Cloudways is the preferred way to go. You're going to get really streamlined, powerful, fast web hosting. Your WordPress sites are going to scream with it. It's just a really, really solid option. I have not seen anybody really say anything bad about Cloudways. And like I said, I've been with them now for about a month, and it's working out really, really well so far. And I love the fact that if I need to scale that thing up, I can scale it up. It's no problem. The funny thing is I'm now paying about half per month as I was paying with WPX Hosting, and yet I've got a more powerful server environment than I had with WPX Hosting. So there's just no doubt you get more for your money with a virtual private server, but all the convenience of normal web hosting because of Cloudways. And so I'm really happy with it. If you're willing to manage your domain separately and deal with your email separately, then Cloudways is a great way to go. I think the $10 a month option is going to suit most of you just fine. And you can have multiple sites on there. They're going to be super fast. You're going to do really well with that $10 a month. They don't hook you in with that pay in advance and get a lower thing. It's just straight. It's just like you just start paying and there it is. It's a really, really good deal. So that's Cloudways in a nutshell. If you have any questions, definitely feel free to ask and I will answer them for you. All right, we'll talk to you later.